Hey guys, tonight we're brushing back through the annals of history, literally. You're waking up in a silk-draped bed somewhere in the Forbidden City. The air smells faintly of incense, your embroidered pillow has a dragon on it, and a servant is already outside your wooden screen door clearing his throat. It's time to rise, like ceremonially, but your mouth tastes like something between boiled cabbage and anxiety. Because here's the deal, even emperors had morning breath. The kind that could end a dynasty if unleashed during the wrong court ritual. But of course, this is Qing China, so naturally there's a protocol. Your first thought isn't food or dressing, no, it's dental hygiene. Or what passed for it before anyone had heard the phrase. Fluoride enriched. You swing your feet down onto the polished floor, maybe slightly regretting that late-night snack of pickled turnip and dried squid. A eunuch glides in like a human whisper and presents a small bamboo stick. This isn't a fan. It's your toothbrush. Kind of. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while we're at it, tell me your location and the local time, bonus points if you're brushing your teeth while listening. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You peer at the tool, about the length of a chopstick, its handle polished to a smooth finish. A bristled end flares out slightly, looking both elegant and faintly intimidating. Horsehair? Pig bristle? Possibly both. If you squint, you can almost imagine a tiny pig galloping through a bamboo forest, volunteering his back hair for the cause of imperial hygiene. Dental hygiene in Qing China isn't exactly sexy. But it was serious. Think of it, a society ruled by precision, etiquette, and symbolic cleanliness. If your robes were crisp but your teeth smelled like fermented bean curd, you weren't fooling anyone. Clean breath was an extension of moral uprightness. A filthy mouth? That was practically a confession. Historians still argue whether the Qing emperors personally brushed their own teeth. Some say it was delegated to highly trained attendants. Others argue that oral hygiene was such a personal ritual, even the emperor insisted on doing it himself. The truth is probably a bit of both, depending on the emperor and his mood. Either way, the morning ritual was far from casual. You kneel at a low lacquered table. The toothbrush is paired with a bowl of tepid water infused with jasmine leaves, and a shallow dish of what looks like gray powder. No tubes. No minty gel. Just a blend of crushed salt, dried herbs, and brace yourself, powdered cuttlefish bone. Yes, it's grainy. No, it doesn't sparkle. Brushing is less a brisk scrub and more a slow, almost meditative sweep. You don't foam at the mouth like a rabid animal. You dab. Gently. And you rinse with a quiet sigh. Outside your chamber, the palace is already buzzing. Ministers are rehearsing their bows. Musicians are tuning zither. And somewhere near the kitchens, a cook is definitely wondering how to deep fry something that probably shouldn't be deep fried. But here you are, cradling a bamboo stick, dabbing powder against molars while a servant stands nearby holding a silver basin like it's the Holy Grail. There's a rumor, possibly exaggerated, possibly not, that one of the emperors once halted an entire court meeting because someone's breath was so foul it offended the throne. Whether that's true or just court gossip, it underscores a curious point. Dental care, for all its humble function, was deeply tied to social survival. Now picture this. Down the line, centuries before this very moment, the Chinese were already using various tooth cleaning methods. Chew sticks were the OG toothbrushes. Twigs from aromatic trees were frayed at one end, chewed gently until they formed a sort of makeshift bristle. These were both brush and breath mint. And depending on the wood, you might have even gotten a mild antibacterial boost. Who knew tree bark could multitask? But here in the Qing court, that old chew stick era feels as distant as dial-up internet. The bamboo brush is the new standard, elegant and functional, often fitted with soft animal hair and crafted by hand. Handle lacquered. Bristles tied in delicate tufts. Some higher officials even had initials carved into theirs. Personalized dental swag. Because nothing says, "I serve the emperor with honor," like an engraved toothbrush. Meanwhile, down in the dusty records of court inventories, entire ledgers list orders for hundreds of brushes delivered each month. And not just for nobles, palace workers, scribes, even stable boys had access to basic oral hygiene tools. Which means somewhere in the middle of managing tax reforms and suppressing local rebellions, someone was also making sure there were enough toothbrushes in stock. And yes, there was absolutely someone whose actual job involved counting and organizing them. Imagine waking up each morning and thinking, "Ah yes, time to inventory 143 brushes and check bristle quality." Again. That's bureaucracy for you. Still, there's something oddly soothing about the idea. In a world of imperial intrigue and endless etiquette, here was something simple. A brush. A bowl. A breath. The soft bristles on bamboo, the faint rustle of silk sleeves, the wet flick of rinsing water. Quiet, almost sacred. And yet, just beneath the surface, there's tension. Not everyone loved this shift from chewsticks to bristle brushes. Some elders claimed it made the gums lazy. Others thought using animal hair near your mouth was spiritually suspect. And of course, some folks just hated change, like people who still insist flip phones were superior. So the toothbrush, humble as it was, had to earn its place in the palace. And tonight, as you rinse your mouth with a final sip of jasmine water, you sense the calm pride of a morning well-brushed. A quiet triumph. Because here in Qing China, even your oral hygiene says something profound about who you are. You rise slowly, the brush now resting in a fine porcelain holder shaped like a lotus. Your mouth feels, surprisingly fresh, like a breeze through a pine forest. Or maybe just slightly less squid-like than before. The servant bows without making eye contact and whisks away the bowl and powder like it's classified intel. Now that your teeth are accounted for, it's time to talk trade. Because this bamboo toothbrush didn't appear in your chamber by divine mandate. It had to be made. Crafted. Delivered. And behind that single stick of personal grooming is an entire industry running quietly beneath the grand thumb of the Qing Dynasty. You're not walking through a palace anymore. You're somewhere else now, a modest bamboo workshop tucked against the Yangtze River, maybe in Anhui or Jiangxi, where mist curls through the air like steamed dumpling breath. The sound of a bamboo saw is surprisingly gentle, almost hypnotic. The craftsman, more artisan than laborer, sits cross-legged with callous fingers, shaving a fresh stalk of green bamboo into sleek, brush-sized lengths. And here's your first surprise of the day. The Qing toothbrush wasn't just a thrown-together stick with bristles. These brushes followed strict proportions. Some rulers even standardized dimensions, length, width, bristle density. Because obviously, you wouldn't want an uneven brushing experience. How uncivilized. Mainstream records show that court-accepted brushes had to pass certain aesthetic and practical standards. Too splintery? Rejected. Uneven bristle tufts? Back to the pig it came from. Bristles were typically tied in with fine silk thread or even sinew, delicate work for a product that was ultimately destined to be rubbed across someone's molars. And the materials themselves? Bamboo was king, of course. Flexible, lightweight, strong. But not just any bamboo. Some varieties were preferred for their texture, age, and lack of bitterness. Toothbrush artisans often aged bamboo shafts in shaded storage rooms, rotating them every few days like they were aging cheese. A process that ensured a smoother finish and less splitting during use. The bristles, as you may recall from your early morning close-up encounter, were either horsehair, pig bristles, or, rarely, badger fur. Pig bristle was the standard, mostly because pigs were both plentiful and less likely to sue for damages. It had the right firmness, the right texture, and well, the pigs weren't using it. Here's a fringe tidbit for you. Some Qing nobles believed that bristles plucked from black pigs cleaned better than those from white pigs. No, there's no science behind that. But you know how superstitions go. Once it's tradition, it's practically policy. Now imagine the supply chain involved. Farmers raising pigs not for pork, but for their bristles. Middlemen buying bundles of cleaned, sun-dried hair. Couriers delivering bristle packets to artisans, who would painstakingly sort and clean each strand, discarding any that were too curly, too coarse, or, heaven forbid, still slightly fragrant. Historians still argue whether this entire toothbrush supply chain was state-controlled or mostly private. Some believe the palace had contracts with specific guilds or artisans. Others say the trade was open and competitive, and only the best brushes made it past the gates. Either way, brushes had to be good enough to serve not just emperors, but an entire bureaucracy obsessed with ritual and detail. Brushes weren't cheap either. A finely made bamboo toothbrush with black pig bristles could cost the equivalent of several days' wages for a laborer. So while everyone might have had access to dental care, the real luxury lay in the brush quality, like the difference between dollar store plastic and electric ultrasonic marvels that sync to your phone. And here's where things get oddly personal. Some aristocrats reportedly had their brushes dyed with herbal pigments, light saffron, pale jade, or even subtle hints of crimson. It wasn't just for looks. The color often symbolized status or clan. You didn't borrow someone else's brush unless you wanted to start a feud. These weren't just tools, they were daily-use heirlooms. Back in the workshop, you hear the artisan muttering as he tests bristle stiffness with a small water bowl. He nods approvingly. Another brush, ready to travel. Tomorrow it might rest in the mouth of a scholar official delivering a poetry reading in Suzhou. Or maybe in the pouch of a merchant headed to Canton. Because by the mid-Qing period, these bamboo brushes were going global. Chinese merchants, ever clever, realized that foreign traders, from the Portuguese to the Dutch, were fascinated by their hygiene rituals. One Jesuit missionary even wrote home that the Chinese clean their mouths with delicate bamboo and horsehair, far superior to our rough linens. Bamboo brushes started slipping into crates headed westward, nestled among silks, ceramics, and, you guessed it, tea. They weren't always used properly, of course. Some European nobles apparently thought they were eyebrow tools. Others dipped them in scented oils, assuming they were some kind of perfume applicator. Close, but no cigar. Still, the idea spread. Slowly. And unevenly. By the 18th century, it wasn't uncommon to find English brushes with suspiciously Chinese-looking bamboo handles and stiff bristles that felt eerily pig-like. Coincidence? Not likely. But back in China, brush innovation continued. Some inventors experimented with dual bristle ends, one coarse, one soft. Others tried folding handles, sort of like the world's first travel brushes. One even proposed a spring-loaded mechanism that would flick the bristles in and out like a fan. Unfortunately, that one didn't catch on. Probably because the prototypes kept spraying dental powder like confetti. The Qing bureaucracy, ever thorough, maintained logs of brush usage in the palace. Inventories note which servant was issued how many brushes, how often they were replaced, and even which suppliers delivered them. Quality inspections weren't just common, they were ceremonial. If a batch of brushes arrived with uneven bristle bundles, the delivery was cancelled, and the courier might be fined. That's right. Someone got fined for bad bristles. Bet you've never worried about that on a Monday morning. By the time the emperor receives his daily grooming kit, complete with mirror, powder, robes, and yes, the toothbrush, it's already passed through 10 pairs of hands. From pig to palace. From workshop to wash basin. An invisible trail of craftsmanship and care. And as the artisan wraps his final brush in cloth and adds it to the basket, you sense the quiet pride in his work. No applause. No signature. Just a simple object that makes mornings a little less gross. All because someone believed that a clean mouth was the foundation of a clean life. The next thing you notice is the morning sun creeping up, soaking through a rice paper window like golden teeth through silk. You're standing in a narrow alleyway of a bustling Qing town, maybe Hangzhou, maybe somewhere deeper inland, where the air smells like roasted chestnuts and shoe polish, and 1,000 human lives churn just out of sight. The year? Somewhere in the 1700s. And right now, the bamboo toothbrush isn't just a hygiene tool, it's part of a rising middle-class identity. You wouldn't know it from the chaos, but dental care is starting to mean something bigger. Something personal. Something a little bit smug. Let's wander into a modest apothecary tucked behind a curtain of red tassels. Inside, shelves sag under the weight of herbal powders, tinctures, dried seahorses, and there it is, a display of toothbrushes, neatly stacked like chopsticks in lacquered boxes. The shopkeeper, thin and irritable in a "don't ask me about prices" sort of way, is rearranging brushes by bristle color. The selection is surprisingly varied. Some brushes have thick black tufts, others a lighter, wiry spread. Some are bundled with crushed salt tablets, and one set includes a tiny mirror with etched plum blossoms, because nothing says dignity like checking for spinach between your teeth with artisanal flair. What we're looking at here is the toothbrush as a consumer good. No longer a strictly court-issued item, no longer a noble's luxury. Just a thing. A fancy, trendy, must-have thing. Toothbrushes were slowly slipping into the hands of poets, painters, accountants, and bureaucrats. And these were people with opinions. By now, using a bamboo toothbrush isn't just about cleaning your mouth, it's about how you clean it. Do you use powdered charcoal? Burnt deer antler? Crushed lotus seed with peppermint oil? Each had its devoted fan base, and local variations popped up faster than you could say. Mouth rinse. A mainstream historical fact worth chewing on: the Qing Dynasty witnessed an explosion of urban markets and commercial trade. More shops meant more consumer goods, and personal hygiene tools, like brushes, took off. Items once crafted by hand became mass-produced with better tools, cheaper materials, and more standardized molds. In short, toothbrushes went from artisanal to somewhat industrial without totally losing their handmade soul. But here's the quirky bit: some brushes were customized with tiny poems etched along the bamboo handle. Yes, actual poetry. Imagine brushing your teeth while reading. Clouds above, teeth below. Let no cabbage leaf remain so. Okay, maybe not the most moving line, but it gives a sense of how entwined culture and cleanliness had become. In certain circles, gifting someone a toothbrush with a verse was weirdly romantic. You know, like, "Here, think of me while scrubbing your molars." You step back out into the street and realize there's something soothing about this explosion of cleanliness. Behind every tidy market stall or family courtyard is someone, somewhere, spitting into a bowl after a good morning brush. It's a quiet revolution, a movement of oral freshness sweeping across provinces one bamboo stick at a time. Scholars today still debate just how widespread toothbrush use became among commoners during this period. Official records tend to focus on the urban middle class and literate elites, but oral folk traditions hint that even farmers and tradespeople used simpler versions, some with coarser wood, others just chewed twigs. Some historians argue this was more of a trickle-down hygiene effect, with fashion filtering from the palace to the provinces. Others believe the brush had deeper roots in Taoist health practices, an emphasis on mouth purity, breath control, and the internal balance of qi. In that case, brushing wasn't cosmetic. It was metaphysical. Either way, you're starting to see the picture. Toothbrushes weren't status symbols anymore. They were everyday tools, woven into the rhythm of family life. And that rhythm? Very set. Early mornings, just after tea but before rice, with the mother brushing first, followed by father, then children. In some households, one brush served the entire family. A horrifying thought today, but back then, practical. Plus, fewer bristles to wash. A local tea house bustles nearby, where scholars debate Confucian philosophy over scalding cups of green liquid and steamed dumplings. One of them excuses himself to rinse his mouth before returning to recite couplets. He carries a pouch made of silk brocade, and inside it, a travel toothbrush, 2 inches long, capped in ivory. Don't worry, it's decorative. No elephants were notified. Toothbrush pouches, now that's an underappreciated fashion moment. These tiny cloth satchels often matched robes or sashes and were treated with camphor oil to keep bugs out. Some had embroidered names stitched in gold thread, so nobody mixed up their brush at the public bathhouse. A brush misidentification could end friendships, or at least lead to a very awkward letter of apology. You pass a well where women wash clothes, and one gossips about her neighbor who got a bristle stuck in her gums. Serves her right for buying from that cheap vendor, she whispers. The brush market, you see, had its scandals. Vendors sometimes cut corners, boiling pig hair too quickly or using immature bamboo that splintered during use. The worst offenders were dragged to magistrates, or, at the very least, shamed in the town square bulletin. Dental fraud? Oh, it was a thing. And speaking of things, a traveling entertainer is performing just up the road. He juggles paintbrushes, not toothbrushes, missed opportunity, but ends his show by producing a bamboo brush from his sleeve and using it as a flute. The crowd goes wild. He bows, smiles, and reminds everyone to brush before you lose your teeth. Marketing at its finest. You're not sure if it's the crowd, the poetic toothbrushes, or the roasted chestnuts, but this little detour into consumer life has left you oddly charmed. Somewhere between medicine and luxury, hygiene and vanity, the toothbrush has quietly become part of the fabric of Qing identity. And yet, even as the streets hum with commerce and chatter, one can't help but wonder how this humble tool kept pace with the shifting sands of empire. Change was always just around the corner. New inventions, foreign influence, political upheaval. All of it had the power to brush the past away, or, at least, give it a vigorous polish. By now, you've had your fill of bustling markets, embroidered brush pouches, and poetic plaque removal. You wander further, drawn not by sound, but by the soft clack of wheels on flagstones, delivery carts trundling through a quieter district of the city. This is where the real backbone of the bamboo toothbrush trade begins to show, the workshops. They're smaller than you'd expect. Tucked behind beaded curtains or low wooden gates, these are family-run affairs, not sprawling factories. The air is heavy with bamboo dust and boiled animal hair, and somewhere off to the left, someone's definitely trying to whistle while sharpening a blade. It's not going well. Here in the mid-Qing era, the production of bamboo toothbrushes becomes a miniature industry. No mass production yet, not like later dynasties flirted with. But a well-oiled system of labor? Absolutely. You see an elderly woman splitting bamboo stalks into perfect, thumb-length handles. Her fingers move like she's folding dumplings, but with the dead-eyed precision of someone who's made roughly 3 million toothbrushes in her lifetime. The younger kids? They're bundling animal hair, boar, horse, even badger if you were feeling luxurious, into tiny sheaves, prepping them for insertion. Not glamorous work, but there's a rhythm to it. Like watching looms or listening to soft rain, it lulls you. Also, lots of sneezing. Those bristles kick up more fur than a cat cafe. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Qing China had an extremely refined system of guilds and trade hierarchies, particularly in urban hubs like Suzhou and Hangzhou. Craft guilds regulated everything from pricing and supply chains to training apprentices. Toothbrush makers, while lower in status than silk weavers or jade carvers, still operated under these intricate networks. You couldn't just open a brush shop without approvals and allegiances. And then, of course, there's the quirky. Some toothbrush handles were scented. Yes, scented. Infused with oils, like camphor, mint, or even orange peel, not just for pleasant brushing, but supposedly to ward off mouth ghosts. These weren't evil spirits, per se, more like the phantom halitosis of bad breath past. Superstition met scent marketing, and suddenly everyone wanted the minty one. But with a rise in popularity comes competition, and with competition comes drama. Workshops would guard their recipes for bristle softening like state secrets. One rumor tells of a craftsman who sabotaged his rival's boiling barrel by adding lotus seed powder, clogging the bristles and rendering them unusable. Sabotage by powder. Who knew oral hygiene could be so cutthroat? Historians still argue whether these toothbrush workshops were fully autonomous or beholden to wealthier merchant sponsors. Some believe brush making was largely seasonal work, taken up in winter when farming slowed. Others argue it was a full-time trade for entire neighborhoods. The truth probably lies somewhere in between, half necessity, half opportunity. A skinny teenager waves you inside one of the cleaner workshops. Inside, the walls are lined with finished brushes and clay jars. He hands you one. The bamboo feels warm, still slightly damp from the curing process. You run your finger along the smooth shaft, marvel at how tightly the bristles are packed. Someone spent an hour on this. Maybe more. It's weirdly emotional. You sit on a bench and watch. The apprentice beside you hunches over his work with a mix of concentration and mild existential dread, the universal craftsman posture. He's punching holes in bamboo with a tiny iron spike, rotating it just so, then feeding in the bristles one cluster at a time. No glue. Just friction and centuries of muscle memory. Sometimes I mess up, he mutters without looking up. Then I get yelled at by my uncle. There. Outside, someone's shouting about a shipment being late. The supply chain isn't flawless, even in Imperial China. Bamboo has to be harvested at just the right age, too young and it's brittle, too old, and it splits. Bristle hair needs to be cleaned, boiled, bleached with lime water or ash. Then sorted by thickness. Then combed. It's more involved than prepping for an emperor's birthday. You duck out of the workshop and follow one of those carts from earlier. It winds through cobbled alleys until reaching a warehouse near the edge of town. Crates stacked 10 high, each filled with toothbrushes bundled in rough hemp. Some are headed west, to Tibet. Others to the south, into Fujian province. A few are marked for court officials in Beijing. Even in a pre-industrial world these things moved. And that movement? It changed things. Imagine being a merchant in a far-off province and receiving a shipment of toothbrushes from the capital. It wasn't just hygiene, it was fashion, trend, maybe even prestige. Sort of like owning the newest phone today, except instead of FaceTime, it's soft bristles and a smug sense of moral superiority. You hear a story from one porter who swears he once delivered a brush with a handle carved into the shape of a dragon, its mouth holding the bristles. Commissioned by a nobleman with bad breath and too much money. He gave me a sweet cake for carrying it up the mountain, the man says, patting his belly. Sweet cake for sweet breath. Not a bad exchange. In the dusty corners of the warehouse, you spot discarded brushes, broken handles, uneven bristles, twisted shafts. The rejects. Not everything made it to someone's morning routine. It's oddly comforting in a way. Even the great hygiene revolution had a scrap pile. One last quirky detail before you go. There was an old Qing saying. A clean mouth brings a clever tongue. People actually believed brushing daily could sharpen your speech. Or at least prevent your grandmother from smacking you with a fan during dinner. Either way, clean teeth equaled dignity. And in a culture where family honor meant everything, that little stick of bamboo carried a lot of weight. You take one last look at the crates and smell the faint aroma of camphor and dust. It's not glamorous. But it's real. And that matters. Because every revolution, even one as gentle and minty as this, begins not in palaces, but in back-alley workshops, under the calloused hands of teenagers trying not to get yelled at by their uncles. You leave the warehouse behind, blinking the bamboo dust out of your eyelashes, and trail a little caravan of brush merchants heading east. Their carts are squeaky, their donkeys sleepy, and their conversation consists mostly of grunting and occasional complaints about wheel alignment. It's oddly soothing, like following the world's most hygienic pilgrimage. As the road winds out of the city, the scenery opens into misty farmland and scattered villages. You walk beside a merchant named Gao, who's balancing an entire bundle of toothbrushes tied with red twine across his shoulders. He's chatty in that way people get when they've walked a lot and finally found someone who listened without interrupting. Brushing used to be a rich man's habit, he tells you, tilting his straw hat. Now even rice farmers ask for soft bristles. What's next? Chickens using combs? You chuckle, but he's not entirely joking. You're witnessing a strange democratization of hygiene. What started as a courtly habit has trickled into daily life across classes. There's even a name for it, Kochi Shansher. Refined breath for the humble mouth. Sounds poetic. Smells effective. In the early Qing era, oral cleanliness was closely linked with health and virtue. Doctors began to prescribe brushing not just for bad breath, but to balance the body's internal winds. Too much heat in the stomach? Try brushing with salt. Gums bleeding? Mint bristles and bamboo charcoal. You weren't just avoiding cavities, you were harmonizing your soul. Sort of like kombucha, but with more boar hair. Mainstream fact for tonight: traditional Chinese medicine considered the mouth a gateway to the body's inner landscape. Brush care rituals were often timed with the body's qi cycles, morning for freshness, evening for digestion. It wasn't superstition, it was their version of holistic wellness. The merchants stop in a village where the local apothecary has agreed to stock a dozen bundles. You tag along as Gao does his pitch. It's half sales call, half improv theater. He calls the bristles cloud soft, describes the handles as blessed by the bamboo spirits. The apothecary isn't buying it. She squints, pokes a brush, and mutters, "Feels like a porcupine on vacation." Still, she takes the lot. Back outside, a group of children gather to watch the transaction, wide-eyed and giggling. One boy asks if the brushes are edible. Gao deadpans, "Only once." The kids scatter, laughing. You suspect they'll try it anyway. Kids and oral hygiene, always a high-risk combo. The village has its own brush customs, too. You notice a man dipping his in tea before use. Not drinking it, just soaking. He claims it softens the bristles and wards off ghosts stink. Whatever works, honestly. And here's your fringe tidbit. Some remote regions believe that using a toothbrush during a thunderstorm could attract lightning. The idea was that the bamboo acted like a mouth rod to the sky, conducting static energy straight to your brain. Unlikely? Yes. But during storms, you'd find folks quietly hiding their brushes under pillows. Historians still argue whether this belief was widespread or just a quirk of certain mountain communities. Either way, it makes you pause the next time you brush near a window. You sleep that night in a dusty loft above a noodle shop. Outside, the merchants huddle by a small fire, polishing brush handles and comparing regional superstitions. Someone tells a story about a cursed brush that made every user speak in rhymes. Another swears by brushing with ox gallbladder extract once a year to guarantee romantic success. None of this is peer-reviewed, but you tuck it away for future trivia nights. By morning, you're back on the road. Another village. Another set of barters and nods. One elderly woman gives Gao a jar of pickled plums in exchange for 3 brushes. It's not a bad trade. Her teeth, she claims, are older than the emperor's boots. You don't question it. As the carts press on, the scenery shifts again. Low fog creeps through the hills. The bamboo forests return, thick and whispering. Gao stops walking and gestures to a grove just off the path. "This is where we get the good stuff," he says, reverent as a monk at a shrine. You follow him through the stalks. It's cooler here, quieter, the world muffled by leaves and shadow. He points out the difference in color between younger and older bamboo, shows you the nodes that are easiest to work with. This grove, he explains, is family land. His grandfather planted it. His uncle harvests it. His cousin curses at pandas when they get too close. You kneel and touch a stalk. It's smooth and surprisingly warm. Alive, in a way. You can see how someone might build a whole toothbrush empire on this stuff. Back at the road, Gao ties a fresh stalk to his cart with red thread, an old gesture for luck and continuity. "Next harvest's in 6 weeks," he says. "You coming back?" "Maybe. If the toothbrush gods are kind." There's a soft drizzle now. The merchants don't hurry. You trudge beside them, feet wet, but spirit oddly clean. There's something restful about this repetition: villages, sales, old jokes, the creak of carts. Like brushing your teeth, it's the same every day, but never quite boring. That night, around another fire, someone sings a slow ballad about a man who wooed his lover with a jade-handled toothbrush. Everyone laughs, but a few sigh, like maybe they wouldn't mind a brush like that. Maybe there's poetry in plaque removal after all. You wake up to birds arguing in the rafters above you, their high-pitched squawks sounding like they're locked in a heated debate over toothbrush design. You sit up, stretch, and head down to find the merchants already munching on rice cakes and roasted chestnuts. Gao tosses you one with a wink. Fuel for the oral evangelist. Today's destination is a modest town known mostly for 2 things: its annual goat pageant, and a particularly odd dental practice involving mulberry leaves. You decide not to ask too many questions. As you walk, the conversation drifts into the unexpected popularity of toothbrushes among Qing-era scholars. Turns out, brushing one's teeth had become a fashionable intellectual habit. Picture this: a Confucian scholar, ink-stained and cross-eyed from memorizing poetry, carefully polishing his incisors between stanzas. It's oddly elegant. Some of them even commissioned custom brushes with poetic inscriptions. Gao recalls one brush handle carved with the phrase, "Cleansing not just the mouth, but the path of thought." Very on brand for people who believed writing a haiku about moss was an acceptable form of leisure. Mainstream fact of the day: by the mid-Qing period, toothbrushes were often given as gifts, especially among literati and officials. Receiving a brush wasn't just practical, it was a gentle reminder to be polished in speech, action, and yes, dental hygiene. In bureaucratic circles, gifting a bamboo toothbrush was almost a low-key power move. Subtle. Slightly shady. Incredibly clean. You pass a bridge where two elderly gentlemen are playing xiangqi, Chinese chess, with brushes standing in for soldiers. "The general's lost his bristles," one mutters. They don't even look up as you pass, but you swear one of the horse pieces is wearing a dab of toothpaste. Then, just past a rice paddy, you encounter a roadside shrine unlike any you've seen. A stone plinth, weathered and mossy, featuring a carved open mouth and midyan. At its base, dozens of small toothbrushes arranged like incense sticks. Gao raises an eyebrow. "Locals say it's the mouth spirit," he whispers. "Helps you speak clearly, and bite enemies when needed." Quirky? Yes. But the toothbrushes look lovingly placed, some even wrapped in tiny ribbons. You wonder what prayers go with each one. "May my gums be firm." Perhaps? "May my suitor find my breath inoffensive." The possibilities are endless. You continue on, and by midday, reach the town. It's a cozy, looping cluster of homes nestled around a central square where people sell everything from cabbage dumplings to embroidered slippers to homemade toothpaste paste, an earthy mix of salt, mint, and something called dragon powder, which you suspect is neither dragon nor powder. Here you learn something particularly odd. In this town, it's customary for new mothers to chew on a fresh bamboo stick each morning for a full moon cycle, both as a symbol of renewal and to infuse strength into their babies. Scholars still argue whether this tradition had any medical logic or was just bamboo fan service. In the local tea house, you meet an old man who claims to have invented the first toothbrush musical. Yes, you heard that right. According to him, it was a 6-act operatic saga following a lonely brush and its quest for love and acceptance in a world dominated by tongue scrapers. There's a tragic aria titled "Plaque of the Heart." You're not sure whether to laugh or applaud. Possibly both. Evening falls, and the town gathers in the square for a performance of traditional shadow puppetry. Tonight's tale? The legendary tale of a brushmaker who defeats a corrupt magistrate using nothing but wisdom, kindness, and a very firm bristle pattern. As the silhouettes flicker against the parchment screen, you realize toothbrushes have crept into folklore itself. You eat noodles with Gao under a red lantern and sip barley tea laced with osmanthus. "People always think it's about the teeth," he says. "But it's not. It's about habits. You brush every day, you're telling the world I care. Even if my job stinks and my neighbor is annoying and the emperor never lowers taxes, I still care." That sticks with you. Fringe tidbit tonight? In at least one recorded Qing anecdote, a royal advisor was dismissed for using a toothbrush made of dog bone rather than the approved materials. Scandalous? Absolutely. But it shows how serious people were becoming about the brush as a symbol. Not just a tool, but a marker of refinement, or disgrace. As you wander the empty square after dark, the lanterns flicker above you, their glow casting soft shadows across tooth-shaped decorations strung between wooden posts. You pass a mother brushing her daughter's teeth by lamplight, gently humming a lullaby that rhymes, clean molars, with stars above. There's comfort in that routine, the universality of grooming, of small acts repeated in quiet rooms. You start to see why the toothbrush, of all things, became such a fixture. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't heroic. But it mattered. Later, as you lie under a scratchy blanket in Gao's cousin's attic, you think about that scholar's gift brush, the shrine, the tooth-themed opera. One object. So many lives brushing up against it. Your morning begins with the sound of distant pigs arguing over breakfast. Or maybe that's just the village market gearing up for its daily dance of produce and polite yelling. You roll out of your straw bedding, stretch, and find Gao already downstairs, bartering for tea eggs with the intensity of someone negotiating a royal pardon. Breakfast in hand, you follow a narrow dirt path that meanders into the foothills. Today, your destination is a small mountain monastery said to be the birthplace of a particularly spiritual interpretation of oral hygiene. Yes, really. Toothbrushing as meditation. The journey is slow and full of soft distractions, bamboo groves swaying like they're whispering secrets, a lazy goat munching on someone's laundry, and a monk walking backwards reciting poetry to a chicken. Qing China, ladies and gentlemen. When you reach the monastery, it's like walking into a watercolor painting. Slate gray tiles glint under morning dew. Wind chimes clink gently in the breeze. A small garden overflows with chrysanthemums, mint, and, fittingly, patches of golden bamboo. The abbot greets you with the calm of someone who has never had to answer emails. He offers you tea and a small tour. You accept both, trying not to slosh the tea onto the floor, which has been swept so clean you can almost see your confused reflection. The monks here, he explains, don't just brush their teeth. They treat it as a sacred ritual. Each stroke, from molar to incisor, is paired with a breath and a silent mantra. The toothbrush is stored on a miniature altar, often beside a polished pebble or a sprig of mint. They believe oral care influences clarity of speech, and therefore clarity of thought and spirit. Mainstream fact time. Monastic traditions in Qing China did place importance on cleanliness, not only for health but as a form of spiritual discipline. Cleanliness wasn't just next to godliness. It was how you showed respect to your temple, your body, and the universe. A messy mouth? That was like meditating while covered in jam. While this sounds poetic, there's a fringe tidbit here too. One remote sect apparently believed that brushing one's teeth with the left hand brought enlightenment faster, since it unlocked dormant neural gardens. Scholars still argue whether this was symbolic, medical, or just a prank that spiraled out of control. Gao tries it for about 5 minutes before nearly stabbing himself in the cheek and declaring enlightenment overrated. You spend the afternoon helping in the bamboo grove. The monks cultivate a special thin-stalk variety prized for its softness. These are used to make brushes for children and the elderly, gentler on gums, less likely to splinter, and apparently less karmically abrasive. Whatever that means. A novice monk named Min teaches you how to split bamboo using just a thin blade and the rhythm of your breath. He's 12. You are very bad at it. He's very polite about your failure. Min tells you stories passed down from older monks, legends about a ghost who could only be banished by brushing his teeth with salt water and bamboo twice a day. Another about a talking fish who gave a fisherman a magical brush that could clean lies from someone's mouth. You realize something. Toothbrushes aren't just tools anymore. They're metaphors. Like fortune cookies, but with better oral hygiene. At twilight, the monks gather for evening chants. You join them, humming along in the key of awkward tourist. Afterward, they invite you to carve your own brush handle. The abbot hands you a sliver of bamboo, pre-split and sanded, and suggests you carve something meaningful. You consider. Floss or die. But settle on a quiet spiral, like a snail shell, like breath. You don't say it aloud, but it feels right. As the night deepens and you lie on a simple futon in the guest quarters, the sounds of the bamboo grove rustle outside like nature's lullaby. The air smells of incense and dried mint. You hold your freshly carved toothbrush in one hand, and it's calming. Not because it's fancy or magical, but because it's a small thing done with care. A little human rebellion against the forces of decay. You drift off imagining what other secret toothbrush orders might be out there. A mountaintop dojo where they fight with floss whips. An underwater coral colony of brushing mermaids? Probably not, but then again, You met a monk who recites poetry to poultry, so nothing's off the table. By dawn, you're already halfway down the hill, the monastery a quiet speck behind you, its gentle chimes fading into the wind. Your pockets are heavier now, one filled with carved bamboo toothbrushes gifted by the monks, the other with roasted chestnuts from men, who made you swear to chew them slowly so they last longer. You promise, but honestly, you're already on your third. You and Gao rejoin the main road just as a merchant caravan rumbles past, its carts stacked with woven baskets, porcelain jugs, and funnily enough, bundles of raw bamboo. One cart even displays toothbrushes dangling from strings like wind charms. Gao leans in. Mass production, he mutters, almost mournfully. Welcome to the business end of Qing toothbrush history, the rise of bamboo brush makers and the slow but steady march toward toothbrush capitalism. You arrive in a bustling town that smells like ink, boiling starch, and street-cooked noodles. Here, the bamboo toothbrush isn't just a spiritual tool, it's a commodity. And business is booming. You walk through rows of workshops, each one filled with the rhythmic rasp of carving knives and the high-pitched hum of thread spinning. Artisans, sleeves rolled up, are crafting hundreds of brushes a day. You spot one woman who can split a bamboo stalk into perfect shafts in under 10 seconds, no exaggeration. Her hands blur. Gao times her with a peach pit and whistles. A master craftsman named Su invites you into his shop, which feels more like a woodworking library. Rows of brushes hang by size, bristle type, and purpose, some short and chunky for children, some long-handled for aristocrats with fragile egos. He shows you one carved with an image of a flying crane, the handle polished to the sheen of river glass. Special order, he says. Governor's wife. Only brushes on Tuesdays. Mainstream fact for the day. By the late Qing period, bamboo toothbrush production had become a widespread cottage industry. Entire towns like this one sprouted around the craft, supported by access to good bamboo forests and trade routes. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was reliable, and weirdly competitive. Su explains how artisans developed distinct signatures, curved handles, dyed patterns, embedded coins, basically toothbrush branding before anyone had logos. There were even whispered accusations of brush makers sabotaging rivals by soaking bamboo in vinegar to warp them mid-use. Historians still argue whether this was true industrial sabotage or just petty artisan gossip, but records of lawsuits exist. Yes, toothbrush-related lawsuits. You helped Sue's apprentice bundle a crate destined for a northern market. Each brush is packed in a little paper tube sealed with wax. The labels feature calligraphy so elegant it feels wasted on something that's going straight into someone's mouth. As you pass another stall, you're pulled aside by a vendor named Alon, who whispers like she's about to offer state secrets. Instead, she unrolls a mat displaying experimental bristle designs. One is triangular. One has alternating layers of silk and straw. One might be porcupine quill. Gao touches it and instantly regrets it. Alon grins and explains her latest project, biodegradable toothbrushes that also fertilize your garden. Use it for a month, bury it in soil. Tomatoes come up sweeter. It sounds like marketing nonsense. Gao buys too. Quirky tidbit time. Alon claims to be working on a brush that whistles softly when you brush too hard. She calls it mouth karma. You nod encouragingly while slowly backing away. The town's mayor drops by Sue's workshop around midday, mostly to complain that toothbrush-related wood shavings keep clogging the town well. You help shovel a sack of them into a cart, and the scent is actually kind of nice, sharp and green, like bamboo tea. As evening falls, the streets are washed down with ladles of water tossed from buckets, and red lanterns flicker to life above the stalls. You wander through the market with a skewer of grilled lotus root, past stalls selling lacquered brush cases, herbal pastes, and little glass bottles labeled pearl polish, smile like an empress. One enterprising teen is running a game booth where you can win a toothbrush by tossing a beanbag through a wooden cutout of a tiger's mouth. Gao tries 4 times. Misses 4 times. Blames the wind. Buys the brush anyway. You spend the night in a boarding house above Sue's shop. Your room is narrow but comfortable, with faded floral paper on the walls and a pot of tea left steaming by the door. Before bed, you examine the toothbrushes you've collected, each one unique, a little odd, and unmistakably human. Some plain, some carved. One with a lopsided handle that fits your grip a little too well, like it was made for you by accident. You clean your teeth by candlelight, using a brush from the monastery and a peppermint paste from Elon's stall. It tastes like someone tried to pickle a ghost. Lying back on the simple mat, you think about the monk who carved with breath, the artisan who branded with bristles, the girl chasing biodegradable enlightenment. It's a toothbrush, yes, but it's also a record of people, of purpose, of time. Who knew that one of history's most overlooked inventions would be such a mirror of humanity? You drift to sleep thinking about tomorrow's destination, the capital, where teeth meet politics, and where bamboo brushes become tools of image, etiquette, and maybe even propaganda. But that's for later. Tonight, it's just you, a humble toothbrush, and the comforting squeak of Gao snoring in the next room like a duck learning to play the flute. The morning creeps in with the steady beat of wooden sandals on stone outside your window, and the smell of fried dough curling up through the floorboards. Gao is already awake, chewing something suspiciously crunchy, and casually informs you he bought a fried taro roll from a passing vendor without checking whether it was still warm. It wasn't. You hit the road not long after, your satchel now unmistakably clunky with the sheer number of brushes you've hoarded. Gao insists it makes you look like a traveling tooth merchant. You're one slogan away from fame, he mutters, unwrapping another snack. Your path curves into a flatter, wider road, imperial, paved with layered brick and patrolled just enough to make you reconsider jaywalking. You're getting closer to Beijing, the capital during the Qing Dynasty's long reign. Here, the story of the bamboo toothbrush stops being one of monks and merchants and becomes one of courtly influence, etiquette obsessions, and the many, many things emperors like to micromanage. You enter the outskirts of the city by mid-afternoon, and it's impossible not to notice the shift. The homes are taller, the doorways wider, and the bamboo, you guessed it, more decorative. Brushed gold railings shaped like toothbrush handles? Absolutely. A nobleman's gate carved with tiny bristled fans? You stare for way too long before Gao nudges you along. Mainstream fact time: during the Qing Dynasty, Beijing wasn't just the political capital, it was the heartbeat of elite fashion, grooming, and etiquette. Hygiene became a deeply performative act, not just a personal one. And yes, oral care mattered. A lot. Inside the capital walls, you pass imperial officials whose robes shimmer like sunlit koi. Their servants carry polished wooden cases, and if you look close enough, there, tucked beside jade hair combs and tiny tins of lip balm, is the bamboo toothbrush. Sleek. Minimalist. Definitely custom. You follow a nobleman's procession all the way to a sprawling estate where you've been granted access, thanks to Gao's cousin's brother's former tutor. Long story. Inside, everything smells like sandalwood and boiled silk. You're offered rice wine before your boots are even off. Your host is Lady Yun, a high-ranking court widow with an unnerving ability to tell when you haven't been flossing. Her study is lined with scrolls and sketches, including one featuring different types of toothbrush handles organized like botanical specimens. There's a clear favorite, a curved model, rounded with lacquered paint, and wait, is that inlaid silver along the grip? Lady Yun explains that in elite circles, bamboo toothbrushes were not only indicators of health, but symbols of refinement. A brush wasn't just for your mouth, it was for your social image. There were etiquette manuals that went into detail about how to clean one's teeth in the presence of others without dishonoring one's ancestors. Yes, that's a real thing. She hands you one such manual. It's a slim book with elaborate calligraphy and diagrams, one showing exactly how to tilt your wrist to avoid appearing aggressively dental. Another outlines which hours of the day are auspicious for brushing, especially if you're hoping for good luck in examinations. Historians still argue whether these manuals were actually followed, or if they were more aspirational, like those modern cookbooks full of recipes no one ever really makes. You know the ones. Quirky tidbit: there's a record of one Qing prince who had 12 toothbrushes for different moods. Bamboo, Jade-handled, even one allegedly carved from coral. Bad idea. Imagine the gum damage. He supposedly had a servant whose sole job was to pick the brush of the day. Gao suggests applying for that position, but only if dental benefits are included. You're allowed to visit Lady Yun's personal bathing chamber, which has its own bamboo grove growing out of a central stone planter. The air smells like mint and warm rice water. She shows you a brush rack shaped like a dragon curling around each peg. For drying, she explains. Mold is undignified. After tea, served with candied kumquats and a polite but relentless lecture about tongue scraping, you're escorted to the local apothecary district. It's a short walk but long on distractions, lacquer shops, scroll merchants, and one stall selling nothing but brushes for imperial pets. Gao buys a tiny brush. For that one duck we met. The apothecary himself, Master He, welcomes you like your family he forgot existed. He's hunched, spry, and definitely wearing at least 4 layers of robes for no reason. He talks about the intersection of herbal medicine and oral care, how certain pastes made from crushed lotus seeds were believed to align your teeth's qi. Others, made with powdered pearl and bamboo ash, promised breath as cool as mountain fog. He lets you try a dab of a formula labeled Moon's Glow. It tastes like salt, smoke, and faint regret. Gao gags theatrically. You pretend it's delicious. You learn that some bamboo brushes were infused with scents, clove, chrysanthemum, even green tea, to encourage daily use. Brushing, Master, he says, must tempt the spirit before it touches the teeth. You wander through the district as lanterns begin to glow, the hum of the city softening into its evening rhythm. Couriers on foot dart past, and somewhere in the distance, a storyteller's voice drifts over the rooftops, describing an emperor who refused to smile until his favorite brush was found. Gao insists this is a metaphor. You're not so sure. You settle for the night in a guest house tucked behind a wall of flowering hibiscus. The courtyard is quiet except for the splash of a fish pond and the occasional crunch of a bamboo leaf underfoot. Your bed is layered with quilts stitched in the shapes of cloud patterns. Gao is already snoring, having fallen asleep mid-chew on a sticky rice dumpling. You brush your teeth with one of Lady Yun's gift brushes, a gleaming, narrow thing that feels almost too elegant to use. The mint paste fizzes just slightly, and for a moment you imagine yourself not as a traveler, but as a courtly guest in an age where even dental hygiene had rules, ranks, and rituals. Tomorrow, you'll leave the capital behind and begin the long, dusty journey into the countryside again, toward the ports where bamboo began its real journey, across oceans and into the hands of strangers. But tonight you rest with the taste of mint on your tongue and a sky full of stars whispering stories through the bamboo stalks. You rise just after dawn, mouth tingling faintly from Lady Yun's imperial grade toothpaste and dreams cluttered with jade-handled brushes that float like ghosts. Gao, ever the multitasker, is already brushing his teeth with one hand and packing dumplings with the other. You can hear him mumble something about brush diplomacy between bites. Leaving Beijing, the city breathes behind you, grand and elegant, but also a little obsessed with the idea of decorum at every level of daily life, right down to bristles and breath. You trade brick roads for packed earth, polished accents for thick rural dialects, and ornate courts for something that smells suspiciously like goat. Your new destination? Ningbo, one of the main coastal trade ports of Qing China. It's a few days' journey, but this leg of the trip matters because the toothbrush, humble and bamboo-handled, doesn't stay confined to elegant estates and silk-robed scholars. No, it's destined for international glory. Or at least international curiosity. And that starts with the ports. You pass through market towns that smell like fish sauce and ink, where shopkeepers squat behind stalls selling bundles of licorice root, pickled vegetables, and you guessed it, more bamboo brushes. Gao pretends to be outraged at the prices, which, to be fair, are surprisingly reasonable for a product used by emperors and ducks alike. Mainstream fact? By the late Qing period, China had become a hub for the production and export of personal care items, including, you're ahead of me here, bamboo toothbrushes. These ports weren't just for silk and ceramics. They were filled with crates of items designed to intrigue the European palate, which was just beginning to notice that maybe regular oral hygiene was a good idea after all. You ride beside a caravan of traders for a while, some on foot, some bouncing along in ox carts that creak like old knees. One of them, a leather-faced man with a beard that may or may not contain a live cricket, tells you about a legendary shipment of brushes sent to Dutch traders. They thought they were painting tools, he cackles. Use them on canvas. Historians still argue whether this actually happened or if it's just one of those port town legends that never fully dies. You stop for lunch in a village where the local innkeeper shows you a wall display of brushes from around the region. There are double-ended ones for the ambitious, curved handles like serpents, and one shaped like a rabbit for children, complete with floppy bamboo ears. Quirky detail. Some brushes were embedded with fragrant wood chips that released scent when dampened, making brushing smell more like a tea house than a chore. As you get closer to Ningbo, you start to see the ships, first distant masts rising like skeletal fingers above rooftops, then full vessels moored along thick wooden docks. Sailors shout in at least 4 different languages, and the salty wind carries the unmistakable scent of ambition. You dodge a runaway chicken and follow the flow of fishmongers, scribes, and spice dealers toward the customs square. Ningbo's port district is a sensory overload. Bright red lanterns bounce in the sea breeze, and dockworkers shuffle past with crates stamped with everything from dragons to ducks. You see bundles of brushes packed tightly in woven baskets, each tagged with a slip of parchment indicating destination: Batavia, Lisbon, Calcutta, London. You find yourself at a warehouse operated by a shipping broker who introduces himself only as Mr. Fan. He's fast-talking, always grinning, and somehow manages to make brush logistics sound like high-stakes drama. "This one's going to France," he says, showing you a crate lined with pale green silk. "They like the soft bristles. Think it's romantic." He lets you see a shipping log, full of brush counts, lengths, bristle types, and destination notes, written in a dizzying mixture of Mandarin, Dutch, and what might be someone's best guess at English. One entry simply reads, 28 units, bristle unknown, buyer likes the squish. Quirky tidbit? Bamboo brushes were often used as diplomatic tokens. They weren't just commercial goods. They were sometimes tucked into gift crates alongside teas and ceramics. One shipment to a British envoy even included a handwritten note recommending daily brushing for best face impressions. Gao nearly weeps from laughing. You follow the path of a brush crate being loaded onto a Portuguese ship. The crew handles the box like it contains fireworks or antique porcelain. And in a way, it does, porcelain for the teeth. You catch a glimpse of the captain, brushing his own teeth with what appears to be a repurposed ink brush. He nods solemnly when you show him the bamboo model. "Looks nicer," he mutters. "Still hate the taste." It's here you begin to realize that the toothbrush is more than a grooming tool. It's a cultural ambassador, a bamboo-wrapped invitation to rethink breath, teeth, and personal care. Sure, it may not have the flair of silk or the weight of porcelain, but it fits into the hand, into the mouth, and eventually into the habit. Historians still debate how widely accepted the Chinese-style toothbrush was in Europe at first. Some argue it took decades before the bamboo design caught on. Others say sailors and missionaries were early adopters, brushing away bad breath like it was a religious obligation. There's even talk of Napoleon owning one. But then again, Napoleon supposedly owned everything, including an emotional support cannon. You spend the night in a loft above a spice merchant's shop, listening to the lullaby of waves slapping docks and gulls screaming at moonlight. Gao's snoring harmonizes disturbingly well with the squeaky pulley just outside the window. You drift to sleep imagining a brush floating across oceans, whispering, "Don't forget to rinse." The journey of the bamboo toothbrush isn't over yet. It's only just begun to wander into foreign mouths and new daily rituals. But for now, you close your eyes in the soft scent of clove and salt air, dreaming of sea-bound bristles and the tiny, unexpected ways cultures collide. Morning in Ningbo has its own flavor. It smells like salt-crusted fish, freshly roasted barley, and ambition, that peculiar scent of a city that knows it has something the world wants. You yawn, stretch, and wander past stalls hawking everything from fermented duck eggs to questionable jade pendants, looking for the breakfast stall Gao promised had toothbrush-level crunch. He wasn't wrong. The fried dough twists could sand the paint off a temple door. But this morning, you're not here for breakfast. You're tracing the long, odd route by which bamboo toothbrushes, designed for Qing mouths, wiggled their way into Western hands, and palates that weren't necessarily ready for bristle-on-gum intimacy. It turns out, global hygiene was about to have a very awkward first date. You make your way to the home of a retired interpreter named Madam Lee, whose parlor is stacked with shipping manifests, broken teapots, and a shockingly large collection of European toothbrush knockoffs. Some have metal handles. One has ivory bristles, ouch. She pours you tea and insists on showing you a letter from her grandfather, once an assistant to a Jesuit priest who documented new and exotic personal customs for the European elite. Mainstream historical fact? Jesuit missionaries played a major role in bringing East Asian ideas, including astronomy, medicine, and yes, hygiene, to Europe. Among their many records were detailed notes on the daily grooming habits of Chinese nobility, including their use of the yeshu, or toothbrush. Madam Lee reads aloud in a gravelly whisper, pausing for dramatic effect. They brush each morning, as if to cleanse away evil thoughts through the teeth. Such discipline surely repels both demons and cavities. Gao rolls his eyes. Classic Jesuit drama, he mutters, mouth full of sesame pastry. As Westerners arrived through trade ports like Ningbo and Canton, they didn't just take home porcelain and silk, they also took home stories about how Chinese people brushed their teeth with tools made of plant and animal, about how they boiled bristles, perfumed handles, even passed brushes down as heirlooms. These little details, strange and fascinating, were often copied, or mangled, by foreign merchants eager to cash in on what they perceived as exotic wellness practices. And oh, did they mangle! You examine a British copy brush from the early 1800s. The handle is heavy wood, about as ergonomic as a fence post, and the bristles appear to be clipped horsehair, densely packed and curiously angled. According to Madam Lee, early European attempts lacked finesse. Quirky tidbit? Some of these early European brushes used pig hair dyed blue, just to make it feel more scientific. Others had detachable bristle heads, which sounds smart until you realize they rarely fit back on. Madam Lee hands you a small leather-bound booklet. It's filled with translations of hygiene tips, likely carried by Dutch traders. Brush before eating, it suggests, lest the night demons ferment your tongue. The phrasing is strange, but the intent is clear. Eastern oral care was becoming a matter of fascination, if not full adoption. Historians still argue whether European adoption of the bamboo toothbrush was truly widespread by the 18th century. Some claim it remained a niche curiosity until mass production techniques caught up in the 19th century. Others point to maritime records that list brushes as standard kit for sailors, suggesting a quicker, more practical spread. Still others wonder if it wasn't until the elite began to mimic Eastern luxuries that brushing teeth became remotely fashionable. After thanking Madam Lee, who insists on gifting you a splintering French knockoff for historical comedy, you head to the Ningbo Library? Or rather, what passes for a library, a converted tea house with scrolls stacked like logs and one very overworked curator who greets you with the weariness of a man who's had to explain the difference between astrology and astronomy far too many times. Here you learn something curious. Qing records occasionally mention tribute brushes, personal hygiene tools offered as part of diplomatic gifts to the court. One record details an ivory-handled bristle brush from India, received by a Qing envoy, noted as both effective and frighteningly firm. Evidently, foreign toothbrushes were not always up to Qing standards. But the exchange wasn't one-sided. Bamboo brushes found their way into portside shops from Goa to London, usually stripped of their original context and repackaged with whatever exotic flavor traders thought would sell best. A bamboo brush became not just a tool, but a symbol of cleanliness, of Eastern mystery, and of the strange and winding path of global trade. Outside the tea house library, Gao is haggling with a man over a crate of genuine Qing dental kits. Inside are brushes, tongue scrapers, and tiny sachets of herbal tooth powder. Gao's already picked out one for himself, the deluxe goat hair edition, which he insists is too soft to clean anything but a cloud. As evening approaches, you join a small group of travelers around a dockside fire. One man says he once saw a European noble accidentally eat the bristle side first, and then pretend he meant to. Another swears that brushing before bed is what kept him from catching ghost sickness on a sea voyage. They can haunt you if your mouth smells like mint and sandalwood, he explains gravely. Quirky? Yes. Believable? Barely. Entertaining? Always. You lean back against a coil of rope, watching stars smear across the sky in long, lazy trails. Somewhere out there, you imagine a sailor unwrapping a bamboo brush for the first time, turning it in his hands, wondering what exactly he's supposed to do with it. Brush up or down? Eat it? Worship it? The learning curve is steep, but the mouth, in all its weird biological stubbornness, eventually adjusts. So here, on a coast lined with brush-filled crates and tales from 100 tongues, you realize the bamboo toothbrush didn't just migrate, it adapted. Translated. Reinterpreted. And somehow, through oceans and accents and unfortunate bristle choices, it endured. The morning mist clings to your robes like old secrets. Ningbo is stirring, but not yet bustling. You sip a watery rice broth while perched on a stool made for someone with fewer knees. Gao is late again, of course, and you're not entirely convinced he didn't disappear into a tooth powder smuggling operation overnight. No matter. Today, you're following the bamboo toothbrush as it makes a curious turn, not just outward to the world, but inward, into the rituals of daily life across Qing society. From emperors to monks to rice farmers with 3 teeth and a lot of opinions. You begin at a local temple, not because monks had great dental plans, but because they kept the best records. A soft-spoken scribe in sun-faded robes leads you past rows of prayer wheels and into a dusty alcove full of monastic journals. These monks didn't just chant and copy texts. They also wrote down everything. And yes, that includes toothbrushing schedules. Mainstream historical fact? Monastic routines in Qing China often included early morning cleansing rituals, including brushing teeth and scraping the tongue. Cleanliness wasn't just about health, it was seen as a form of spiritual discipline, a way to purify the body and, by extension, the mind. You leaf through scrolls that list, in neat brushstrokes, morning regimens, wake at dawn. Bathe in cold water. Brush teeth with bamboo and mint powder. Meditate. Feed the chickens, if any. And here's a delightful little fringe nugget for you. Some monks believed that neglecting oral hygiene invited bad qi into the body, which would then swirl around your intestines and make your prayers sound off-key. That's right. There was once a belief that bad breath could literally ruin your chanting pitch. You step back into daylight to find Gao waiting. His excuse? He claims he got ambushed by a brush vendor offering a 2-for-1 lifetime supply. You don't question it. Together, you head toward a residential alley tucked behind a noodle stand that smells like chili oil and regret. Here you find the home of an elderly widow named Auntie Shio, who remembers brushing her teeth with bamboo long before it was a Western fascination. She doesn't speak much, but her eyes light up when you ask about morning routines. She shows you her father's old brush, a handle worn smooth from decades of use, the bristles long gone but the memory still sharp. Every morning, she rasps, he would brush facing the courtyard. Said it helped him greet the day with dignity. Also said bad teeth made for bad neighbors. She laughs, a wheezy little bark, and adds, that brush got him through 3 wives, 2 wars, and 1 particularly spicy dumpling. As Gao jots notes, you examine Auntie Shio's old grooming basket. Alongside the toothbrush is a tin of herbal powder, a carved tongue scraper, and what appears to be a tiny mirror made from polished bronze. Vanity, you suspect, isn't a Western invention after all. Historians still argue whether bamboo toothbrushes were used consistently across all levels of Qing society. Some claim they were mostly a luxury item, found in urban centers and elite homes. Others point to archaeological finds in rural villages, simple brushes made from bundled grass or splintered twigs, as evidence of widespread adoption. The truth, as usual, is probably somewhere in the middle, chewing minty leaves and mumbling about floss. You take a walk through the market district, watching shopkeepers open shutters and sweep dust into the sunrise. Here, toothbrushes aren't glamorous. They're practical, even mundane. A woman selling chicken feet hands you a brush alongside your change. A street barber has a rack of them next to his razors labeled "Shared Use Discouraged." And then, tucked between a medicinal tea stall and a man trying to sell pickled radish that smells like bravery and death, you find something curious. A toothbrush fortune teller. No, you didn't misread that. An elderly man, with more eyebrows than teeth, invites you to choose from a selection of elaborately carved bamboo handles. Based on your pick, he reads your dental fate. Apparently, your gums are ambitious but prone to melancholy, and you should avoid citrus. Gao draws a brush shaped like a dragon and is told he'll die surrounded by admirers. He's insufferably smug for the next hour. Quirky? Absolutely. Legitimate? Debatable. Memorable? Unquestionably. You retreat to a quiet tea house for lunch, watching steam curl from your cup like a lazy spirit. Gao's still rambling about his bristle-based destiny, when a traveling scholar plops into the seat beside you. He's overheard your questions, and, as scholars do, begins to answer them before you even ask. He tells you that in certain Qing households, brushing teeth was treated as a family affair. Fathers taught sons. Mothers passed down brush-handling techniques to daughters. Some brushes were customized, lengths adjusted for hand size, bristle stiffness for age. It wasn't just a tool. It was an heirloom. A toothbrush, but make it sentimental. And here's something deliciously specific. During weddings, it was customary in some regions to include a bamboo toothbrush in the bride's trousseau. A little signal that she was entering a house with both dignity and minty breath. The groom, meanwhile, was expected to gift one back after the honeymoon, to ensure harmony of breath. The scholar smirks. As you leave the tea house, brushing crumbs from your robe, you find yourself thinking not just about teeth, but about time. About the odd, quiet ways people shape their days around little rituals. How brushing your teeth isn't just about hygiene, it's about claiming a moment. About declaring, here I am. Awake. Present. Hopefully not bleeding from the gums. And in that stillness, as the day tilts toward afternoon, you understand how something so small, just a bit of bamboo and boar hair, could become woven into the very fabric of a civilization's rhythm. Not flashy, not heroic, but constant, reliable, comforting, kind of like a really good nap. The road turns muddy just past the outskirts of town, where the fancy lacquered signs stop and the ducks start chasing you like they've got a grudge. You're following a scent trail, not of tea or spice, but of ink and vinegar and old scrolls. Today is all about records, and the people who obsessively kept them. You and Gao are heading toward the regional archives, a squat building that somehow smells both dusty and pickled. Here, beneath rows of wooden ceiling beams and next to a surprisingly vocal cat, are shelves upon shelves of Qing-era domestic guides. The kinds of books no one brags about but everyone secretly depends on. You know the type. Proper conduct for the civilized gentleman, how to not die from winter. And of course, the bestseller, 100 Household Remedies, 50 of which involve ginger. Your target is a chapter titled something like, On the Maintenance of the Mouth and the Brush Which Serves It. And yes, you have to unroll about 6 scrolls just to find that delightful nugget. According to these household manuals, there was a clear etiquette to toothbrush care. You didn't just use it and toss it into a corner like a chopstick at a picnic. You cleaned it, boiled it in vinegar, sun-dried it, stored it in a special brush sleeve made of embroidered silk if you were feeling particularly bougie. Mainstream historical fact? Qing domestic handbooks often contain precise instructions for personal grooming, including dental care. Toothbrushes were expected to be cleaned weekly and replaced every lunar season. Yes, even then, people knew that gunky bristles were a bad vibe. Gao finds an illustrated scroll, half faded, half fabulous, of a noblewoman brushing her teeth by a lake. Her servant holds up a mirror. There's an egret watching the scene with the same energy as someone judging your breakfast order. Clearly, dental hygiene could be picturesque too. There's something weirdly satisfying about how much effort went into documentation. Lists of bristle materials, seasonal care tips, apparently bristles frizz in summer humidity, and even bad luck days when you were not supposed to replace your toothbrush, lest your fortune unravel like a threadbare robe. That leads you to your fringe tidbit of the day. In some regions, people believe that breaking a toothbrush accidentally was a sign your ancestors were displeased with your mouth. The remedy? A small offering of rice wine and a whispered apology to your toothbrush. Because sure, why not? You move into the portion of the archive dedicated to trade logs. Less poetic, more numbers, but surprisingly illuminating. Gao finds shipping receipts for bundles of bamboo rods shipped from Sichuan to Canton, marked as oral hygiene instruments. Some have imperial stamps, others look like a child dipped a potato in red ink and called it a signature. But here's the part that gets interesting. Different provinces favored different bamboo. Historians still argue whether this was due to regional pride, superstition, or just which forest was closest. Some preferred the thin-stalked mozo bamboo, strong, smooth, almost elegant. Others liked the chunky, ridged kind that looked like it was designed to fend off wolves. There are debates and marginalia between scholars and merchants. One insists that thicker bamboo brushes scrub sin from the gums. Another replies sarcastically, only if sin is shaped like taro paste. Ancient shade, written in ink. From the scrolls you glean the surprising influence of seasonal festivals on toothbrush sales. Around the Lunar New Year, brush vendors would paint their wares in auspicious red and gold. Some were even dipped in flower water, mainly to mask the smell of the glue used to hold bristles. The result was festive dental hygiene, and you start to suspect that someone probably composed a poem about it. Possibly a bad one. You exit the archive with a new appreciation for the quiet bureaucrats of history. The ones who logged toothbrush shipments while dynasties rose and fell. Who inked bristle specs into ledgers next to rice prices and bandit alerts. The unsung heroes of oral tradition, quite literally. It's nearly sunset by the time you and Gao wander back into the market. There's music now, someone's plucking a sansien, and lanterns have begun to glow like sleepy fireflies. Gao insists you try a new snack, fried taro balls with plum sauce. You try to argue, but he's already bought two. As you munch on the sticky, crunchy mess of a food, you notice a corner stall selling toothbrush accessories. That's right. Accessories. Think carved bamboo stands, brush oil for conditioning the handle, little silk bags embroidered with peonies and pandas. The whole thing looks like a toothpaste influencer's dream. You strike up a conversation with the vendor, a woman named Lu who looks like she could kill a man with a stare but chooses instead to run a luxury brush boutique. She tells you business is good, especially among younger clients who want status brushes for their vanity shelves. Some even request customized calligraphy, names, blessings, the occasional romantic poem. You know, roses are red, bristles are blue, fresh breath is sexy, and so are you. Lu laughs at her own joke and gives you a brush with your name painted in gold. Gao pouts until he gets one too. His says, Dragon of the Morning Mouth, which he claims is now his official title. As you walk back to your inn, Lu's brush tucked into your robe, you reflect on just how intimate this history has become. This isn't the kind of story people carve into monuments or stitch into flags. It's too quiet. Too daily. But that's what makes it powerful. This bamboo brush, humble, splintery, sometimes pointy in the wrong places, connected people across class, time, and belief. It wasn't heroic, but it was habitual. And maybe, in its way, that mattered even more. You pass a temple bell sounding the hour, a few stars blinking to life in the sky, and a noodle vendor slurping dramatically in the dark. Gao hums a tune with suspicious accuracy. And you feel something settle. Tomorrow, you'll dive into cross-cultural contact. But tonight you sleep with the image of an old scroll, ink-smudged and loved, whispering advice about toothbrush angles and ancestor forgiveness. And maybe, just maybe, you dream of bristles. You wake to the rattle of an early cart, somewhere down the cobbled alley behind your inn. It's carrying turnips, possibly judgment, and definitely a small rooster perched where it shouldn't be. The sun hasn't fully committed to rising yet, but you and Gao are already packing for a trip beyond the market. Today you're crossing borders, sort of. Your goal? To follow the bamboo toothbrush beyond Qing China, into the messy world of cultural exchange, maritime trade, and smugglers who probably had no idea they were revolutionizing dental hygiene. You start at the docks. Not the fancy imperial ones reserved for tribute fleets and scroll-fondling officials, but the cluttered, fish-smelling merchant docks where deals are made over tea, yelling, and the occasional thrown sandal. Here, crates move faster than gossip, and if you're not careful, you'll get run over by a guy balancing 8 barrels of pickled radish on his back. He nods at you like this is normal. Among the cargo lists and shipping manifests, you spot familiar terms: bamboo brushes, lacquered, bristle goods for hygiene, and the occasional poetic label like dragon's whisker wands. It's clear these weren't just for domestic use. They were leaving China by boat, headed for Japan, Korea, Vietnam, even further west toward Persia and the Ottoman Empire. Whether labeled as luxury goods or humble household wares, they traveled. Mainstream historical fact: by the late Qing period, Chinese merchant networks had established strong ties across maritime Asia, with bamboo toothbrushes among the many small items that filtered out as part of larger shipments of tea, porcelain, and silk. The toothbrush was never the star, but it was the dependable backup dancer in many trade caravans. One box you inspect carries markings in both Chinese and Persian. Gao raises an eyebrow. Probably a port like Hormuz. He murmurs. Lots of cultural crossover. You imagine a Persian merchant unboxing a crate of bamboo toothbrushes and thinking, why not? It beats chewing on salt twigs. That brings you to today's quirky tidbit. In 18th century coastal Vietnam, traders supposedly used toothbrushes as diplomatic gifts. Not fancy ones. Just brushes. Wrapped in dyed mulberry paper, tied with red string. The logic? They were practical, portable, and showed you cared about someone's mouth. Imagine getting friend-zoned by a toothbrush. As you sift through more records, you start to see a pattern. These brushes weren't static, they changed. In Japan, for instance, bristle styles shifted toward shorter, more rigid tufts. In Korea, handles got slimmer, sometimes curved. Even the concept of tooth powders was adapted to local tastes. Less clove, more mint, or in some unlucky cases, powdered oyster shell. Yum! You pause at a faded ledger that mentions a brush shipment bound for Dutch traders at the Canton factory. It notes a delay due to unexpected monkey interference. You don't even ask. You just accept that monkeys, like fate and toothaches, are part of the historical record. Historians still argue whether the export of Chinese toothbrushes meaningfully influenced European designs or if it was just one of many parallel inventions. After all, Europe had its own chew sticks and boar bristle monstrosities. But there's some evidence that merchants, especially those dealing in tea and porcelain, also brought back hygiene tools they found useful, and more importantly, easy to replicate. You follow this thread to a warehouse on the edge of the city, a quiet place stacked with replica goods meant for foreign buyers. Fans painted with mythical beasts, porcelain bowls with oddly Dutch-looking windmills, and yes, toothbrushes with handles carved in Western script. Gao holds one up and squints. It says Toothbrush. Close enough. One record details a shipment meant for British sailors. The brushes are noted to be dipped in camphor oil before packing, probably to preserve them during long voyages. Or maybe just to make them smell like something other than old rope and regret. As you walk through the warehouse, you notice one shelf that looks oddly modern. Sleek brushes painted black, tied with ribbon, and bundled in boxes stamped with the emblem of a now-defunct merchant house. Gao picks one up and declares it preposterously stylish. You both agree it's the toothbrush equivalent of wearing sunglasses at night. You can't help but imagine how these brushes might have been received. A sailor trying one, then deciding it wasn't worth the effort. A merchant's wife keeping hers in a cabinet because it was too pretty to use. A scholar writing a confused letter about the stick with hair, possibly alive. Toothbrushes don't often make it into the epic narratives, but in small, quiet ways, they crossed cultures like little bamboo diplomats. You stop for lunch at a tavern full of dockworkers, their chopsticks clacking like maracas. One old man overhears your conversation and adds, "Used to dip ours in green tea before brushing. Less bitter." He nods, sips his soup, and resumes chewing like he didn't just drop a historical footnote into your noodles. That night, you and Gao return to the market square. A puppet show is underway, a retelling of Journey to the West, but everyone's voice is slightly too nasal, and the Monkey King seems to be wielding a toothbrush instead of a staff. Artistic liberties, clearly. You find yourselves quietly stunned by how a small tool, one few people probably ever thought about, moved through borders, customs, and habits, brushing its way into dozens of societies. It didn't scream revolution, but it whispered comfort. Clean teeth in unfamiliar ports. A habit from home, whether home was Suzhou or Saigon. The moon hangs overhead like a pale silver bowl. Gao flicks his wrist, showing off his new, imported brush with a ridiculous flourish. You laugh, and for once, you don't mind the quiet. You've got one more layer to explore: how bamboo toothbrushes faded, adapted, or were eclipsed by newer designs. But that's for tomorrow. Tonight, let the sea breezes cool your face. Let the ghost of a Persian merchant dream of minty breath. And let your brush rest easy. The morning stretches across the rooftops in a long, golden sigh. You stretch too, wincing slightly. Apparently, sleeping on a bed stuffed with millet hulls doesn't do wonders for your lower back. But it does prepare you for the final leg of this journey, the slow fade of the bamboo toothbrush. You head into a quieter corner of the city, where the old shops huddle close like gossiping grandmothers. There's a sense here that time's moving slower, like molasses in winter. Or like that one civil servant who pretended not to see your permit and asked you to come back next equinox. Your destination is a private archive run by a scholar named Malin. Her house is part library, part attic, and part accidental bird sanctuary. A pheasant walks through the reading room like it owns the place. You don't argue. Malin greets you with tea, then hands you a box wrapped in silk. Inside, dozens of old toothbrushes, some lacquered, some plain, some that honestly look like the teeth-cleaning equivalent of a rice paddle. "This," she says, "is how Qing modernity died, one bristle at a time." You raise an eyebrow. She grins. "I'm joking. Mostly. Because while the toothbrush did start fading in its original form, it didn't disappear. Like the mullet haircut or bubble tea, it just evolved. Mainstream historical fact: by the late 19th century, Western influence in China had grown stronger, through trade, colonial footholds, and regrettably, several deeply unpleasant wars. With that came a flood of Western goods, including new toothbrush designs. The bamboo models didn't vanish overnight, but plastic, metal, and bone-handled brushes began trickling into upper-class households. The change wasn't just materials. It was aesthetics. Bristles were cut straighter. Handles were thinner. Some came with embossed brand names: Pearl Clean, Royal Brush, even one that proudly said, "London Dental Stick," for gentlemen's mouths only. Somewhere out there, a Qing scholar was rolling his eyes hard enough to sprain something. Still, bamboo hung on. Especially in rural areas, where Western goods were scarce, expensive, or just not trusted. A farmer wasn't going to trade his simple brush, bristles replaced with horsehair from his own stable, for some city slicker contraption that smelled like lemon soap and imperialism. You and Malin pore over a series of old health manuals. One suggests brushing with powder of crushed lotus seed mixed with wind-dried mint. Another recommends a vinegar rinse followed by vigorous chewing of pine twigs. You mentally rank that somewhere between haunted salad and mouthwash brewed by ghosts. The quirky tidbit this time? A late Qing dentist once tried to launch a mail-order bamboo toothbrush service. He failed. Not because people didn't want it, but because he insisted on carving each brush with a personalized poem. Business was slow, but his clients had the best-smelling metaphors in town. And then, of course, came the 20th century. Factories. Mass production. Global branding. Toothbrushes stopped being personal objects and became disposable ones. Bamboo couldn't keep up with plastic's sleek efficiency. Why wait a day for a carved brush when you could buy 10 off a shelf? Historians still argue whether the bamboo toothbrush died out because of colonial pressure or just natural evolution. Was it cultural erosion, or practical economics? Did people really prefer plastic, or was it simply all they could find? Either way, bamboo brushes faded into the background. Occasionally, they'd show up in museums or nostalgia shops, next to clay teapots and rattan fans, as symbols of a slower, more handcrafted world. But they never fully vanished. In recent years, there's been a quiet comeback. Environmentalists, tired of plastic waste, started promoting bamboo brushes again. Not for tradition, but for the planet. Suddenly, what once marked you as old-fashioned marked you as eco-chic. The circle of history turns, not with a bang, but with minty breath and biodegradable handles. You lean back on Mayleen's porch, listening to the wind shift the wind chimes. Gao joins you with 2 steaming buns and the satisfied grin of someone who's just bought a toothbrush with 0 regrets. Walnut wood, he says. Not bamboo, but still classy. You asked him what he'll do with all the ones you collected. Museum exhibit? He shrugs. Maybe. Or maybe I'll just put them in a box marked things that touch teeth. You nod slowly. It feels like the right place to stop, not because the story ends here, but because it's finally quiet. You've followed a sliver of bamboo from imperial court to peasant hut to floating crate, across centuries of brushing and bleeding gums and dental poems written by moonlight. It's weird. It's niche. It's weirdly calming. And now you get to let it go. The sun begins its slow descent again, turning the tiled rooftops gold. Pheasants wander by. Someone down the road is brushing their teeth with something that's probably bamboo, probably homemade, and almost definitely accompanied by grumbling. You smile. Clean teeth, clear mind, and a story well chewed. And now, with the markets closed, the tea leaves steep dry, and the last bristle tucked safely away, it's time to let your thoughts slow. Let the night uncurl around you like steam from a forgotten cup. The city's noise fades into the hush of rustling fans and distant footsteps. Maybe there's a breeze through an old paper screen, or maybe it's just the soft exhale of your own breath, rising and falling like the tide of history itself. Let your mind drift to the cool shade of a bamboo grove, where nothing much happens, and that's exactly the point. The leaves whisper, but they never hurry. Time is syruptic here, slow and forgiving. The kind of place where toothbrushes are carved, not pressed. Where routines are rituals, and brushing your teeth is less about minty aggression and more about gentle rhythm. Back and forth. Back and forth. There's no quiz at the end of this. No moral. Just a sense of quiet awe that even something as small and overlooked as a toothbrush can carry centuries of stories, slipping through generations with barely a squeak. That maybe in your own life, the smallest habits matter more than you think. So settle in. Let your muscles loosen, your jaw unclench. No brushing required. Close your eyes, friend. You've earned this pause. You've traveled far enough for tonight.